Good morning, everybody. Good morning from the beautiful campus of Guilford College, where we are having a torrential downpour and lots of wind. But I hope that it will not affect our program or dampen our moods, considering that we have a couple of very special guests with us today, all the way from Napa Valley, California. Welcome to all of you who are joining us for the last Thursday of the month coffee chat with Guilford College, October 2020. My name is Ara Sergiui, and I am very happy to see all of you and have this program with you as we showcase the brilliant minds that work at Guilford College or have benefited from a Guilford education. If you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Please make sure that you remain on mute so that the background noise does not affect everyone else's ability to hear the program. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please put it in chat, and then we will get to it if we can at the end of the program. We do have some other questions that were submitted also in advance, but don't hesitate to submit any questions you might have. And please limit the chat function to only that, to asking questions and not other comments, because it becomes difficult to keep track otherwise. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers, whom I've come to know quite a bit in the past few months, and I am thrilled that they are joining us all the way from California. First, I'd like to tell you about Kate. Kate Graham is a 2001 graduate of Guilford College. She's a partner at Dirty and Rowdy Family Winery. Prior to joining the winery, she was the manager of alumni relations at the Pahara Institute, a nonprofit organization that strengthens and sustains high integrity leaders who are reimagining public education through a lens of equity and excellence. Kate also worked as the Global Leadership Program Associate for Blue Energy, a San Francisco-based nonprofit connecting isolated communities along the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua to energy, clean water, and sanitation solutions. Before moving to California, Kate lived in Atlanta, Georgia, where she held leadership positions with AmeriCorps and Special Olympics Georgia and Whole Foods. Kate earned her MA in Organizational Management and Development from the Fielding Graduate University and her BA in English from Guilford College. Kate is joined today by Hardy Wallace, a graduate of Guilford College, 1996, who for 10 years has helped redefine California wine. As owner and winemaker of Dirty and Rowdy Family Winery, he has focused on lesser-known varieties, leveraged ancient and new winemaking methods, and has been a leader in wine marketing. Hardy has been listed on Wine Enthusiast's 40 Under 40, called one of Napa's most exciting winemakers and 10 names to know in American wine. He has been featured in hundreds of publications and has addressed groups from Google, Wharton, and UCLA Business School. His pioneering work at Dirty and Rowdy has influenced and inspired wineries around the world. Hardy earned his BA in Integrative Studies from Guilford College. Hardy and Kate live in Napa, California, and have two children, Maple, who's 4 years old, and Hervé, who's 22 months. And I think they are they were with us earlier, so it sounds like they probably went back to watching TV. So welcome, Kate and Hardy. It's so good to have you here as featured speakers.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. Yes, we do have the two children, so you may hear them, or they may enter the screen at some point in the next hour. So we'll enjoy them
No problem.
if they join.
So I'm curious to know, how do people with degrees in English and integrative studies become connoisseur winemakers?
Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the things with the integrative studies program at Guilford, when I was there, it was really primarily independent study based. And it was one of those programs that encouraged me to follow. I don't want to use the term follow your bliss because it's deeper than that. It was following like those things that you want to dig in deep to. Those things, whether they seem in some way completely unrelated, whether it's, music theory and, beat poetry, or whether it's geology and Zen Buddhism. To be able to follow all these things that may not have a traditional path, lined up, that there may not be a clear line from point A to point B. But those are the things that I think by following those, those things that really move you, by following those, you're able to uncover what it is that's truly deep down inside. And that for me, I think is what Guilford, stepping out of with a BA in integrative studies that was Eastern philosophy's influence in classical music or on Western creativity. What do you go out and do after that? A lot of people would say. And I think one of the best things you could do is become a winemaker. So I think it really set me up to dive deeply into things, regardless if you thought there was a pre-etched path that you could take. It was about finding your own way.
Great. Kate, what about you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of jokes about English majors. So, my path was fairly windy until I met Hardy. And, for him, I think wine scratches that similar itch that of some of the things that he studied at Guilford and his musical career after. For me, getting into wine was very much about our family. And I've only been working full-time for the winery for about 5 weeks.
But part-time for 11 years.
Part-time, yeah. I mean, informally for 11 years. But I do think that, being an English major and then also going into diving deeply into nonprofit work for the first part of my career, it sets you up to have a point of view and to know how to communicate. And I think one of the strengths that we really have at Dirty and Rowdy, and I think Hardy and I together, is a pretty strong point of view when it comes to wine, and also a very unique communication style. And we get really wonderful feedback from our customers and wine community. And so I think that all, when we draw the dots back, I think that it really does tie back to Guilford and our time there and our studies there.
That's fantastic. There's so much going on around the country on an ongoing basis about the value of a liberal arts education. And the two of you have just answered that so beautifully as to why it is in fact effective and how it sets you up for a life of success. What I'm trying to still figure out is I love to garden. So I plant a lot of flowers and tomatoes, because when you live in the South, you have to plant tomatoes. And I also have tried, planting grape wines, if you would. And then I realized dogs could eat them and that could kill them. So then I had to move them and then they died. And so I'm trying to figure out, not the dogs, and so I'm trying to figure out, how does one go about selecting the type of grape, the land, and all the other things you have to consider to make wine?
Sure. I mean, that's one of the most important things. If you're truly wanting to make compelling wine, not something that is serviceable and just a beverage. If you're trying to make something that really truly connects, kind of heart and soul and place and space together, you really need to find the right thing in the right place. So selecting the right type of soil, well-draining soil, to looking at what the climate is of that spot, the aspects, the slope. There's so many different things that go into finding what makes a spot special for growing grapevines, because grapevines are pretty hardy. They can grow almost anywhere. They're resilient. But to do something where they can become something special takes a lot of know-how, takes a lot of experience. And it also sometimes takes looking around the corner. There is what is sellable and what is marketable. And there's sometimes what is right and what's the best thing that can be there, even if that isn't what's popular. Or one of the big things like Cabernet, Chardonnay, or Sauvignon Blanc, one of the, say, 6 or 7 grape varieties that most people know, sometimes what's the best thing there is something they've never heard of.
So Hardy, thank you for that. You talked about the traditional way and made some references. Is that how you do your winemaking at Dirty and Rowdy Winery?
Sure. I think on the winemaking side, one thing, and again, goes back to Guilford, even though we have a path that most people would see as kind of a really redefining moment in California wine, we know our history. We know we know the steps of the people that have come before us in California wine. So we definitely take that nod to what has been done before, and we learn from the people that have done, have worked 30, 40 years longer than we have. But at that same point, we don't fall back on that. We use that history, we use that knowledge to then be able to create something new and something that, can take us out of the swim lane of the status quo and hopefully, go beyond the pale for California wine. So in our winemaking, we do things that are, 11 years ago, we're seen as borderline revolutionary. And for a lot of people, because they were revolutionary, they were ridiculous at the time. So they were not taken super serious at the moment. But then as things started to change and started to evolve, the certain changes that we made in how we ferment our grapes, how we pick our grapes, what we choose to work with, what we plant, how we, areas that we work in, even though we're in Napa Valley, the most famous wine growing region in North America and one of the most famous in the world, we chose to actually work mostly outside of the valley in lesser known areas that had something really interesting and compelling to say. And we were one of the first in our generation to really not to do that for, let's say, for curiosities, like, hey, here's our core, here's our core business of everything that plus we've got this little freak show on the side here. No, we followed our path and focused on those spots that people would normally ignore, and often which are much better grape varieties and regions, especially during climate change. So we focused on those things, and all of a sudden the industry shifted and started to follow what we were doing. I don't know if you'd like to say anything.
Yeah, I think that covers most of it. The other thing I would say too, and I think it sort of goes back to having a point of view. Hardy really started with making wines that he wanted to drink, and I don't think that's a starting point for everyone. So if you're, if you're starting from there, you're not necessarily making something for the masses. And I think that actually, when you aren't doing that, that it provides a very different way of approaching your business. It gives you a lot of freedom. So to work with some of the vineyards that he's talking about, and to connect with customers in the way that he can and we can, I think is truly unique.
If I could add just one thing with that, it may sound strange that winemakers don't make wines they want to drink, but it is often they make wines they want to sell. It would be like being a recording artist or being an author. And like, I'm going to make a book that is a New York Times bestseller, like pulp hit or something. It may not be what I want to read, but I know people will buy it. Or same thing with music. I'm going to create like a pop song that I feel like is not what, like, I want to do free jazz over here, but I need to sell some pop music. And I think that's the real difference, is that we didn't follow that route. We focused purely on that space that moved our soul, which was in that kind of outlier, kind of outsider wine.
Well, that's really great. And it is different. And you guys have been trendsetters. And I'm curious to know what prompted you to do it a different way.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me personally was my post-Guilford career. I've really had 2 stages of post-Guilford. I fell into technology shortly after graduating and spent about 13 years doing sales and marketing for technology companies. And in that time, I had a very non-Guilford experience in that time. But what I loved was I was doing mostly entertaining with clients. You have a wine list every night. And I found my joy in exploration. And it wasn't just like, hey, get people what will delight them. It was that idea of like, let's go someplace we haven't been before, whether it's in a conversation, whether it's in a glass, and where does that take us? So my thought and my love really became kind of looking kind of in the exterior spots of wine as opposed to what was popular. And I sought those wines out just as a consumer, as a wine lover, then I became a wine writer. All those things were the parts that really moved my heart and soul. But I couldn't find those wines that were made in a similar way. Most of them were from, little backwaters in, parts of southern France or, parts of the Jura or, parts pretty much unknown. And in California, we have this ability we have an incredible climate. It's a huge state. We have incredible soil diversity. People weren't making wines like this. So if we were going to start a winery, it was really truly in doing something that we wanted to drink. I'm sorry.
You have a big fan over there.
Exactly. We should have got him loaded up this morning before the call. I'm kidding. But we wanted to find those spots and try to not recreate what we were drinking from Europe and some other, corners of the southern hemisphere. We wanted to see what could we explore in a similar fashion that wasn't being done. So I think that was really what kind of launched us to starting Dirty and Rowdy with this particular point of view.
It sounds like you gave yourself the freedom to really explore your true nature and tune into kind of, what it is that you felt was going to be the way to do it for you so that you could really deliver on what you envisioned would happen if you were to make wine.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is when we look at the timing too, we started in 2010. And with 2010, that was kind of right towards the end of really the first wave of social media exploding. So whether it was Twitter, whether it was Facebook, Instagram was just about to launch. But what we had found in that last few years, both pre-wine business and getting into the business, I got into the wine business in 2009, was that with the explosion of social media, the world became a lot smaller. And if you wanted to have a focus, if you wanted to really, dive deep into something, you could connect with people around the world very easily, before you were relying on traditional media to be able to share that, which can be very expensive, it can be very time consuming, a roll of the dice. And for us, it really helped us kind of knowing what tools were available to us and free. Social media, for the most part, still is free. What was available to us, and how could we reach out to people that, what we do is, might be for 0.00001% of the wine loving population, but that's still a large number. So that really helped us out.
Great. Thanks, Hardy, for that. There's clearly a lot of excitement and enthusiasm in your voice. I want to switch gears just a little bit, and maybe I'll start with you, Kate, with this next question. We often hear that a Guilford education is different, and you've, Hardy, you've talked so much about being different, right? It's right up there with what we hear about a Guilford education being different. So, Kate, and then I want to come to you with the same question, Hardy. How has that education being different served you in the work that you are doing?
For sure. So I started Guilford in 97. Hardy had actually graduated. But in 96, there was a book, I think it was 96, that came out, Colleges That Change the World. And Colleges That Change Lives, sorry. I also think it changes the world. And in there's a blurb about Guilford and a piece about getting young people to do things that they'd never, would never maybe do otherwise. And I think that's really, really true for Guilford. And certainly for me. I think that we had the gift at Guilford of following our interests and of following, real privilege to follow whatever sort of path we wanted to follow. And, Hardy and I, we never took business classes. We didn't take traditional marketing classes. Neither one of us have an enology degree. And I think, it goes back to what you're saying about the liberal arts education. I think for us to have all that actually really gave us an edge and continues to. We're not following sort of norms that we might otherwise. We're not, scripted in our approaches, and I think even in other parts of our life as well. Hardy does tend to be more of the gas, and I tend to be a little bit more of the brakes. But I think that we really believe in the unseen, and I think that that comes from Guilford, and we're able to bring that into all that we do, I think, as a family and certainly as a winery.
That's excellent. That's a great response. Hardy, try and beat that.
I cannot, so I will keep mine shorter.
Values.
But I really think that for me, the two things. One was that Guilford really helped teach me, and it really guided me to learn how to learn. And especially when you're coming in as an outsider. So as Kate mentioned, neither one of us have viticulture or enology degrees. And so not only did we start at a pretty blank slate here as far as winemaking knowledge and kind of how to run a small business and things like that, but that Guilford education is what really taught me then, okay, how do I dive in? How do I attack this? How do I learn these things? And not only that, but how can I make that choice of like, though this may be the path, I like this and I like this, but I'm going to go this way with a few things. I'm going to kind of divert, from the status quo. And at the same point, though, it goes deeper than that. It goes down to the values that I think Guilford really brings into you, that, it's that love for and empathy for folks, that whether they have the same point of view or a different point of view from you, it's showing that love, that empathy, that respect, holding them in a light. And I think keeping that in mind, not only for the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis, our growers, our pickers, our customers, people that may have, the people that also laughed at us when we first started. It's holding that light and holding that respect. And I think through that, you can only come out on top. It's having that respect and having that love that at some point it will shine back as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are excellent responses. So just switching gears a little bit more, but continuing along the same lines, this year has been a challenging one for us all. I think in the process of all the visioning and strategic planning exercises that I've been involved with for the past 20 plus years, and everybody would very cleverly come up with Vision 2020 or Vision 2020. Not a single one of those exercises predicted 2020 to be what it has been. So I'm sure it's been challenging for you as well. Can you tell us how it's been challenging for you?
Absolutely. I think there's, multiple places, but like everyone, COVID was a huge, just the rug was pulled out from under us. On March 14th, I more or less, turned to Kate and said that, our chances of surviving this year, of actually making it would be very slim. About 50% of our business on a normal year would go to super high-end restaurants. And with those restaurants closing and with no thought of when they might reopen, the idea that we would be able to make it without them was very slim. And then also with the economy crashing and all sorts of things, we didn't know. It looked so bad that the idea that we'd be able to make it was not, it was far, actually, I think I may have said 50-50, but it was probably, felt like 10-90. Like we were getting ready to, think what's next in our life. Add that, so COVID, and then the growing season this year. And that's the thing where people forget, at the core of winemaking is agriculture, it's farming, and we are at the whims of Mother Nature. We also are on the brunt of, on the front lines of climate change. So things that have been perhaps seemingly easier a decade ago or 2 decades ago in growing conditions in California are now incredibly challenging. Massive heat spikes, but then with 6 weeks of wildfires that just weren't localized here in Northern California, but really stretched the entire state. So having to think about how we're going to work, how we're going to survive with COVID, how we can actually deal with what we're facing on Mother Nature's side. Then at the same point, how do we work with COVID on the agricultural side, where we're dealing with not just ourselves, but often teams of 8 to 40 pickers helping us when we're harvesting vineyards. How do we keep people safe? How do we keep our families safe? And it was an incredible challenge, and I'm glad we are on the other side of it right now.
That's good. I am glad that you are. That's wonderful. Kate, what about you?
So I would go back actually to 2017, and this may sound biblical, and I was a religious studies minor, so it will fit, but we had some serious, I would say more personal challenges and tragedies in 2017, where right before harvest, at the beginning of August, Hardy developed a virus in his eyes and I was not working for the winery at the time, that caused him, he couldn't see for a number of weeks. We had our daughter Maple on like a school daycare vacation. So she was with us at home and I was working full time, and she was 1 at the time. And then my brother, who was in Oregon, was coming down to visit us and died in a single car accident on his way. And the culmination of all that was a lot, obviously. And then when Hardy luckily he had recovered enough to be able to dig into harvest, but he wasn't able to attend one of the memorial services for my brother, which was in Maine. And the day after my daughter and I came back from that service, the 2017 fires hit, and they were awful. We were surrounded by fires similar to this year, and the smoke got to a point where, while the downtown Napa wasn't under mandatory evacuation, we felt like we needed to leave because of the smoke and having our daughter. So we evacuated for 2 weeks, and Hardy couldn't get into the winery during that time. And he can speak more to this, but there's, a certain level of touch that needs to happen in the winery, especially during harvest. That's like the most critical time. So all of that at the time, I thought like nothing could be sort of worse than this. And we ended in this spot where Hardy was able to, through a lot of manipulation, turn the wines that were in the winery that did have a lot of issues with them, into a sellable, actually really beautiful wine that has been written about and has received accolades. And we called it unfamiliar, and really because we found ourselves in this very unfamiliar territory, not sort of knowing how to handle all of what was sort of handed to us in 2017. So I say all that to say that it actually oddly prepared us for 2020. And I think that, even with everything that's gone on and the devastation that this valley has experienced through climate change and through the wildfires this year, my hope for everybody is that this will be maybe that year for folks where they can come out on the other side, and that there is some beauty that comes out on the other side. That feels like a stretch some days, but that's really, I think, at the core our hope. And I think we've been able, through a lot, really, I credit Hardy, through a lot of hard work and innovation, and that ability to see around the corner, and that ability to take risks and say, okay, what do I need to do next to make this work? And we did that in 2017 and survived. And I feel really confident that 2020 is going to, end positively in all the ways, and that we'll be able to do that again.
So this is, these are excellent insights and experiences you're sharing with us. And I certainly love your very optimistic attitude, shaped by experience that you had 3 years ago, that perhaps, you're feeling this way. I want to know how you've handled these challenges, both, the 2017 into 2020, and then in 2020, what have you done specifically to deal with these challenges that you faced?
Sure. On 2020 specifically, especially with COVID and that thought that, with 50% plus of our business vanishing overnight, the big thing for us has been, hold on, I'm passing an iPad to my son right here.
iPads, that's the solution to parenting in 2020.
Oh no, we said we'd never do it.
And my parents.
Yes, but the big thing for us was when it came time where we realized the position that we were in. I think we really looked deeply, and we had two choices. We can either wave a flag and say, like, we need help, more or less bail us out, enter into fire sale, deep discounting, panic mode, or we can sit back for a second and think about, we're all in this situation. And are we in a position that we can help? Even though we desperately need help, maybe there are folks that need help more than we do. And so we took that idea of actually really going to our customers and our direct customers, not necessarily a wine shop or a restaurant, but the people that have the wine in their glass. And we know most of these people closely, but we know what they were missing, what was scary to them, what they were hoping for. If you're going to be stuck at home for a couple months, what are they looking for if you're a wine lover and a food lover and a music lover and all these things? And we figured out a way to bring that to them. So immediately when, actually the week after the shutdown, we started a live music and wine series that was not about replicating an in-person wine tasting. It was actually creating a totally different experience for folks that included live jazz from Grammy winners that are friends and customers of ours, wine tasting, community chat, all based through Zoom. But it was really giving people a way to be with others, to share that experience, to have that feeling that not only this is a weird digital reproduction of something we'd rather be doing, and it's only about 50% as good, and that's not really that good. But it was giving some people hope, giving some people a totally different experience. And now 28 weeks later, our crew is still together almost every Saturday. They love it, the amount of reception we've got back from our customers, how they've invited friends and family in. And a lot of wineries started doing these online tastings shortly after we did. And almost everyone stopped because they couldn't figure out, actually, their goal was to get online and to try to sell people wine. And that was never our goal. It was never like, hey, come on and buy this and buy this. No, it was actually focusing on wines most of our customers already bought, that already had, and it was adding value to something. So it wasn't saying like, hey, buy more of this. It was like, hey, you already own this. How can we make this experience even more special for you? And I think that built so much customer loyalty. It made us feel good and connect to our customers in a much deeper level. And the flip side of it is it more than erased that deficit that we had from the loss of restaurants. So that really set us up early to think about how do we restructure our business and what's the most important thing for us. And I think it really truly is shining that light and connecting with our customers and being a guide for them into kind of their journey in life. And hopefully it's a very positive experience for them.
We do talk about the light often at Guilford College, don't we? And I love how you put that into your response, to shine your light and be a light for others, especially when things are tough, and not necessarily just only when it's convenient to do that. I love that. Kate, do you have anything you want to say in response?
I would just, I think I would echo everything Hardy said, and also to realize what I've actually realized a lot more in 2020, and Hardy and I've talked about this a lot, but I think it really sort of has come into it's like now I get the like full body experience of it versus just maybe the intellectual understanding of it, which is that, you know, wine really is, for us at least, so much more than about this beverage or product that you have in your glass. And I think we are really discovering and coming into what we can do as a business, and also you know, to provide people with, as Hardy said, you know, joy and light and love. And I think that for some people that's a leap to make, like, well, you make wine, how can you provide that experience? You know, this is, I think if anything, for people, they can maybe sometimes make it the connection to food, like, okay, this will pair well with what's, you know, on my plate. But to make the leap to like, this actually pairs well with what's in your heart, or the experiences that you're sharing with your friends and family, especially now with COVID. I mean, it seems sort of weird for me to say that, like, I hope we as a family get to spend even more time together, you know, because we've spent a lot of time together in the last few months. But I think that, like, I don't know if that fully makes sense, but that's really what I think we're aiming for and going for. And that got like super clear this year. And I think if we continue to follow that, I mean, we're seeing that that's what customers need and want, and the direction that they will, you know, continue to go and follow us on. And it feels really great to be able to connect with people that way. And certainly, you know, we miss the restaurants. We miss people calling us and saying like, oh, I had this great bottle of your wine at this amazing restaurant in New York, and like, you know, I want more. But you know, we don't know when that's coming back, or if it is. And it seems sort of crazy to try to focus on bringing something back to people when we can provide something completely new and different, that I think fills space that people really need right now.
And if I could add one thing to that too, I think we've mentioned this I was interviewed by another paper recently that in this time too, we've also shrunk our capacity. We've actually completely cut our winemaking down by about 50%. And most people would say, oh my gosh, that's a horrible thing. You've cut your, you know, you're only making half as much wine as you used to. And I think going back to what Kate said, it's like, now we've got our focus. And now it's no longer about, do we have to make wine? We've never made wine for everybody, but we've made wine for more than we could drink. And now that point is actually, what if we make it just for those people that, you know, who is that smallest viable audience? Who are the people that really get it? And that we want to be able to share that experience with, that, as we mentioned, if we shine that light, they'll hopefully shine it on someone else. And so by cutting our production by half, it's actually was probably the best business decision we've ever made. It gave us less wine to sell, but because of the way that wine works, whether selling it wholesale or direct, it actually totally, it more than paid for itself, and took a little bit of load off us as well.
That's really very insightful. I love how you explain that. And it really puts things into focus in the realm of everything that we're going through right now. And I'm kind of in the back of my mind, and I'm trying not to, for the lack of a better term, politicize the conversation. But in the back of my mind, you know, it brings forward that notion of, you know, why a liberal arts college is a liberal arts college. It's not supposed to be the research university. It's not supposed to be a community college. It's supposed to be that niche. And so, at least for me, that's something that resonates at this moment in time from what I've heard from you. Very good wisdom, and I appreciate that. A couple of more questions, and then we're going to go into some audience questions. And then I want everybody to stick around because we have a drawing at the end of our program. So do not log off early if you want to be eligible for winning some really good things from Dirty Rowdy Wine. You've talked a lot about your experiences since Guilford College, your work experiences, your personal lives, and what you've learned and how you put all that into practice. What if you were to go back and be back in early 90s or, you know, late 90s? And what advice would you give yourselves if you could go back in time to when you were a Guilford College student living on campus?
Would you like to take that first?
Yes, I can go first. So I don't want to sound, if there are students on, I do not want to sound insensitive in saying this, especially in a time of COVID and pandemic. But I would say I would give myself the advice to travel. And I didn't do a study abroad program, and Guilford had some incredible opportunities. And I had a disappointment my sophomore year where I didn't get into a program that I wanted to do that was outside of Guilford. It was a National Outdoor Leadership School program in South America, and I didn't get into it. And I really let it negatively affect me in a way that that I wish now, that I hadn't so much. And rather than, I wish I had looked to Guilford to say like, oh, here's all these other amazing opportunities within the college, and to have done some travel abroad. And I look at the folks that I know that did those programs and had incredible experiences, and sort of this like their own little community within the greater Guilford community. So I would say, really traveling would have been something.
I want to hear from Hardy in response to that question too.
A suggestion, if that's okay.
Guilford now has a new strategic enrollment initiative called the Guilford Edge. And as part of that, we create opportunities for Guilford students to be able to travel and have wonderful experiences. And I'm really hoping that in the coming months, we can work with you to design an experience like that for students to come out to your way and spend one of those 3-week courses with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredible idea, because I think for me,
not to put you on the spot or anything.
No,
we're in.
No, but I think that's also one of the things that, especially like, there are certain industries that sometimes people wonder in career paths, like, how do I do this? Like, how do I get a job in the NBA? How, like, without being necessarily a player, how do I become a winemaker? How do I, things that may move their heart, may move their soul, but there isn't a direct connection. Like, I don't know someone to talk to do this besides sending a blind letter, off that maybe might or might not get read. But that being said, I think one of the things I would give, as far as looking back to, especially, if I could talk to, Guilford age Hardy now, I think one of the things, especially today, is that almost everyone is available. And whether it's due to social media, I think COVID has made people even more available, is that if you have a desire, if you have a question, if you want to make a connection, it's to ask. And it's not just, I do receive a lot of asks, but often they're not well thought out. It's just like, hey, can I talk to you for 30 minutes? And, blank. And, it's not a very well thought out type thing. I don't know what's going on. But if you put that connection, if you do some research, everyone, almost anyone would be willing to talk to you. And if those that aren't, move on to the next person. Like when I was at Guilford, I mean, even though we were in a different world, email was just starting to, kick up and things like that. I mean, I can remember reaching out to some of my absolute heroes and getting interviews for my senior thesis, whether it was Gary Snyder, Allen Ginsberg, Zakir Hussain, like all these folks that truly moved me, and be like, oh my gosh, like I'm on the telephone right now, or we're doing, an email back and forth, or writing letters back and forth. And I think I've used that in my entire path. So from leaving my corporate world gig to starting at the, in the ether, and just kind of, without any connection to the wine industry, reaching out to those people that move me. And I think that is the thing I would stress for everyone at Guilford, both then and more importantly now, because we're all connected. Everyone's looking for something in this, kind of world of confusion that we're in right now. And I think those are where all the opportunities are for those that raise their hands.
Fantastic. Beautiful advice from both of you. Thank you. And thank you for agreeing to host students for a 3-week course. That sounds amazing.
Well,
now I have to make sure our faculty colleagues like that idea.
Exactly.
Too.
Tell them to come too.
The best time is August through October. That is the
Yes, there you go.
They'll have the most work they can do.
We will work with you on designing a course like that. I'm sure faculty and students alike will be thrilled. And we'll make sure this is for 21 and older.
That's right.
So we're going to now go into audience questions, and then we're going to do the drawing for bottles of wine, masks, and T-shirts. So stick around, everybody, for your chance to win from Dirty and Rowdy Winery. The first question is from Ty in Greensboro. To both of you, you've talked about how your liberal arts education at Guilford has prepared you for your entrepreneurial winemaking enterprise. Can you tell us who were the professors who influenced you the most while at Guilford?
Oh yeah, for sure. So Hardy will speak more to Michael Strickland, but he was certainly an influence. The Stoneburners were a huge influence. Adrian Israel, Jim Hood, all just incredible humans, incredible professors. And I have a lot of gratitude for all of those folks. Carolyn Beard Whitlow would be another one I would say. Who would you?
I think you'll have Michael Costello almost in tears. He's really hearing you on this. How about you, Hardy?
I mean, for me, definitely the two, for my integrative studies thesis, I had two advisors, Michael Strickland and David Barnhill. And I think the patience they had with me as a 19 to 23-year-old, or however old I was when I graduated Guilford, maybe 22, the patience, the guidance, and I think they were able to see kind of wild energy and enthusiasm and excitement, and they were able to get a way for me to actually learn how to focus that and to guide this journey for me through Guilford that included, ethnomusicology, creative writing, philosophy, and all these things to tie together. I mean, I spent, every summer in summer school in Northern California studying Indian classical music, again, connecting to writers and musicians that really moved me. And I wouldn't have done that without Michael and without David. I mean, having those professors that truly believe in you and know that, like, yes, you may sound like a wacky 19 or 20-year-old at the time, but how to focus that energy and put it into use. And I've used that the rest of my life.
Wonderful. And bless you, Kate.
Thank you.
And a shout out to Marguerite, Kate's mom, who I believe you're with us as well. Thanks for raising such a wonderful Guilfordian. So we have another question. This one is from Stephanie. Why did you decide to reintroduce orange wine, being that this sort of winemaking originated in what is now the Republic of Georgia? What made you decide to bring this type of wine back to the forefront again?
That's an awesome question. And just a quick 5-second overview. Most people think of really wine in three ways: red wine, white wine, and rosé or pink wine. But there is an ancient style of winemaking called orange wine. It does not include oranges. It's made from grapes, but it's made from white wine grapes that have been left on the skins for months. So when we're making wine, normally when we make white wine, we squeeze the juice out of the white grapes and ferment the juice free from the solids. The solids are discarded. But in orange wine, think about it like making tea. You leave the tea bag in for months, or in this type of winemaking, you leave the skins in contact for a long period of time, and it turns that more or less golden or yellow wine into the color of orange. It's a totally different flavor profile, totally different taste, aromatics, sensation. But I got really into these wines right around 2006, 2005, as they were more or less getting reintroduced into the US, whether it's people from the Republic of Georgia. It's also fairly popular in Slovenia, parts of northern Italy. And they were starting to find their way into the US, and they captivated. They truly moved my heart and soul. And A few people had experimented with them over the years, maybe 3 or 4 that I knew of in the US. But again, it was a curiosity. It wasn't something they focused on. And knowing when we started Dirty and Rowdy, orange wines and what we call skin fermented white wines were going to be a huge part of what we did. Again, going back to, it's not about what can go out there and be instantly marketable or sellable or, in high demand. It's about doing the things that move us. And I love with orange wine, having that history and that link back to that 6,000 plus year winemaking tradition that kind of connects. I mean, it's part of that timelessness where we can connect ancient history to right now and also to that future. And that's the magic that I think we work in when we work in wine. It's that lineage that's really from the back of like the start of civilization in itself. And we still do a lot of the same things.
That's it's great. Thank you for sharing that history and that passion. I'm from Iran originally. I was born and raised in Iran, and as I'm sure you probably know, Shiraz, the city of Shiraz, was one of the birthplaces of wine.
That's correct.
And so I can understand what you're saying about the ancient way of doing things and how sometimes that's really good to reintroduce. One more question, and then we're going to get into the drawing for prizes. What is the origin of the name of your winery, Dirty and Rowdy?
I'll keep this one fairly short. Dirty and Rowdy, when Kate and I met in Atlanta, so both Kate and I lived in Atlanta for 10 years. Dirty, my friends, 'cause I grew up in New England, and most of my friends, all went to schools in New England or kind of New York North, and then had their careers there. When I was in Atlanta, though I had the technology job, I was also trying to do a lot of music recording and had a small recording studio and everything. And all my Yankee friends would refer to me as like, Dirty from the dirty South. And it kind of stuck. And as I started writing about wine, I started a wine blog that became very popular that was called Dirty South Wine, where the tagline was wine is meant to be crunk, kind of in that whole Dirty South hip hop movement. And it stuck, people remembered it. And our business partner, Matt, and his wife, Amy, his nickname is Rowdy and he grew up in outside of Knoxville, and it's been that way since birth. But when we look at the wines that we make, they're always unfiltered, cloudy. You'll see particles floating because we don't filter anything out. We want to give you that whole experience. When you look at a bottle of Dirty and Rowdy and hold it up, it looks very dirty and rowdy. So it fit both our personalities and some history that we had, but more so actually what lives in the glass.
Terrific. Great. Well, and that's a lot nicer than what I imagined the answer. So
it's not always great to give people your email address, like kate@dirtyandrowdy.com. I feel like I always have to explain that.
Might end up a lot of spam filters.
Yeah.
I can imagine that can be a little fun sometimes. All right, listen, two of you, you are fantastic, and you are so great that you have offered to give away some goodies from your winery for our guests today. And I believe that my colleagues have done a little bit of random drawing, if you would. And am I still correct that we're going to do 2 bottles of wine, 2 masks, and 2 T-shirts? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I'm happy to start with the wine. And the 2 winners for the wine are Michael Costello, class of 2011, and Liz Valera, class of 1996.
Liz, hey! Awesome.
So we'll be in touch with the 2 of you to see which wine you want to select, and then we'll work with Kate and Hardy to have those mailed to you. The T-shirts, the winners for the T-shirts are Bill Rayford, class of 1958 up in New York, and Bob Norfleet, class of 1966 right here in Greensboro.
Awesome.
So we'll be in touch with you to see which size T-shirt you want, and then we'll work with Kate and Hardy for getting those to you. And then for the masks, we have the first winner is Amabel Allen.
Yay!
So, yay! And the other winner of the Dirty and Rowdy mask is Dan Mosca, who is parent of 2 alums, and he's a member of the Board of Trustees.
Fantastic.
We need to coordinate sizes for masks with anybody.
Well, actually, we do have small, medium masks that are one size and medium, large masks. So
okay.
depending on what they feel may fit.
Okay, well, we'll ask Amabel and Dan what size mask they would prefer, and then we'll be in touch with Kate and Hardy. So thanks, you guys. You are exactly the kind of people that I would say those of us who work at Guilford College are very proud of. You are the walking billboard for an excellent and values-based and practical liberal arts education. And I'm so glad that you were able to join us today to enrich us and enlighten us with all the knowledge that you have. And I'm glad that the weather, at least so far, has cooperated, even though the power flickered off about 3 times right here in the office. Are there any last words you want to say, Kate? Hardy, do you want to just any last words you want to leave our audience with?
Just thank you so much for the opportunity. And it was really great speaking with you.
Yeah, and I think too, thank you. It's an honor to be here. And I'm just deeply grateful to Guilford, not only for kind of giving us that freedom and that education to find this path, but it's also how I met Kate, was we connected that we both went to Guilford, and we felt like immediately, if you know someone that's gone to Guilford, you have a connection with them. And you know, it's not just like, hey, I went to University of North Carolina or UC Berkeley or something. We know that experience that you had. We know that education. We know there's some values there that hopefully are right in line. So I think Guilford not only gave us the path to our business, but also to each other. And I'm grateful for that.
And these children.
And the children.
maybe they'll be, we hope that they'll be Guilford grads. Everybody, you know, send some dollars to Guilford so it'll still be around.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Everybody support Guilford College, and we absolutely would like for Maple and Hervey to become Guilfordians. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe, be well, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.